everyone. Welcome to your newest episode of the Cosmic Matrix podcast with your host, myself, Laura Matsu, and my husband, Bernhard Gunther. And on this episode, we are going to be debunking 10 popular myths about spirituality and inner work. So we've noticed that a lot of spiritual concepts, a lot of concepts around self-work, inner work have become way more popular lately. At the same time, we see a lot of misconceptions in the field, as well as a lot of just pure nonsense in the field. So in this podcast, we're going to debunk some of those most popular topics. So in the first hour, we're really going to talk about the law of attraction, what's true, what's not true in that, and how it's potentially misused as well. We're going to also talk about the concept of the twin flame, very popular concept. We're going to talk about the same thing, like is there truth in it, and what is this parts that are basically bullshit. Excuse my language. And then 3, on the first hour, we're also going to talk about is raising your vibration, thinking positive thoughts, what we think about that. We're also going to talk about shadow work, some popular myths we see around that, mainly that, being triggered is a bad thing, or you just have to do a little bit of shadow work and then you integrate it and then you're done. And then the last point on the first hour we're going to cover is this idea of humanity as ascending, and we're just ascending up to higher and higher levels. And in the second hour, we're going to really talk about some of the things some of the myths and kind of misconceptions we see about the concept of occult forces and entity attachments. Namely, you just need to find someone to remove the entity and then you're all good. We're going to talk about the idea that tarot cards and astrology will open up doorways to demons, and speak to that, which is something we also, I think, covered in our podcast about the New Age to dogmatic Christian pipeline. And then another point we're going to address in the second hour is that you need a specific diet to access higher states of consciousness. And the last 2 points are, in order to free yourself from the matrix, you just need to grow your own food, not use banks, etc. And then lastly, does having an awakening experience mean that you're now awake? So for those who are not familiar with the format of our podcast, we always offer the first hour for free. And then we have a second hour to every single podcast, which you can access by going to veilofreality.com/membership. And then if you sign up and become a member, I think it's like, $11 a month, you get access to basically 100 plus hours of every second hour of every podcast where we go deeper. So if you want to get access to the second hour, that's how you can do it. So let's just go right into it. So first, the law of attraction. So let's just define it first. So in case people don't really understand it, or so that we're on the same page with the definition. So
yeah, the common definition, law of attraction, is based on like it attracts like, and that's how it's commonly used in kind of pop spiritual New Age circles. It also ties into how you manifest your quote unquote reality, based on your thoughts, on your whole emotional state, on who you are, your vibration, your energy, and you just attract experiences and hence create your reality as in a kind of solipsistic way. And that's kind of already a misconception here. So you attract experiences, good or bad, quote unquote, because good and bad is very subjective to you based on your state of being, vibration, and all of that. And specifically in the New Age, based on there's this idea that if you're really positive, you attract positive experiences. If you're negative, have negative thoughts, you attract negative experiences. Right. And then I want on the side note, the law of attraction became very popular with 2 people, Abraham Hicks, the channeling, that started already back in the 90s. I remember the book, Law of Attraction. And then also The Secret, which also came out late 90s, very popular book and film. Yeah. And this woman from Australia, Rhonda, I forgot her name.
Rhonda Byrne, I think, yeah.
But it was this really fascinating. You remember the tsunami that happened in India? That was early 2000s. I don't remember, somewhere around the big tsunami, somewhere in Asia, thousands of death. And she came out that the people attracted the tsunami based on their negative thought forms of that environment.
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah.
So she claimed that this is just ridiculous, really.
Yeah, and the main thing too, I've noticed with the law of attraction is it's just like think positive thoughts, have positive feelings, don't have bad feelings because those are bad vibrations. And it's really focused on almost like aggressively just thinking positive thoughts, having positive emotions, and that what normally results in is emotional suppression and denial, actually.
Yeah, exactly.
And so if you have a negative thought, you just deny, push it away. So like, for example, like maybe you have a negative thought like, oh, I need to quit my job. Oh, that's just a negative thought. I need to push it away. So it can easily delude you. It can confuse you. It can make you constantly paranoid. Like when bad things happen, oh my God, this is because of this negative thought I had, you know? And while our thoughts and our mind, state of mind are really important for, you know, the actions we create, the feelings we have, when we're not dismissing that, you know, I've noticed a lot of people take this to an extreme where they're just very aggressively avoiding both negative emotions and negative thoughts. And it basically puts them into a state of denial and then emotional suppression, which is also not good for reality creation.
Yeah. And then we go deeper into this idea of vibration and positive thoughts in point 3. But it goes to those extremes and people deny the dark in the world, deny evil, right? They only see good and only love and light. And that creates imbalance, ironically creates more evil and negativity in the world. You address it as well. But going back to the law of attraction, because none of this is black and white, right? There's truth in it. But it has been corrupted, actually, the idea of the law of attraction from its original esoteric meaning and kind of watered down into basically, quote, I can have anything I want from the universe if I just ask for it and align my thoughts, beliefs, and emotions with my desires, right? That's the law of attraction, ties into you create your own reality. Ask and you shall be given. That's actually also a book from Abraham Hicks, and has also been distorted from its true esoteric meaning, where it said ask and knock and you shall be given, which I'll talk about as well. So from an esoteric perspective, esoteric science means that it's a great work to work towards becoming one with the divine, towards the awakening process, the second birth, to bring forth the true self, your essence, soul embodiment. In esoteric science, also based on like attracts like, but it's has a different foundation, so to speak. It basically means that from the esoteric perspective, that the sincere seeker engaged in esoteric self-work will attract anything that will help him in his soul evolution based on his current level of being, which is a key concept, current level of being, where you're at in your soul evolutionary journey over lifetimes, with the aim of union with the divine and soul realization. That is the great work. And the phrase, ask, you shall be given, as it's written, knock, and ask, and it will be given to you, actually relates to knowledge, guidance, assistance, and occult secrets, meaning hidden secrets, that will help the seeker on the path if he's committed and sincere in his asking. That means the ask and knock. It's about the sincerity, right? The aspiration without demands or expectations for a particular outcome. So it's more the sincere impulse towards an awakening. And then the seeker will attract certain experiences to help them, even guidance and all of that, to help him on this path. So, but the key point to understand this whatever will be given to him or he attracts to him, it's not up to him, basically, the ego personality. It's not up to you, so to speak, of what you think you want based on your ego personality and your desires. Yeah. But it actually relates to soul lessons and karmic lessons over lifetimes.
Yeah.
Did you want to say something?
Yeah. Because I remember a period where I was aggressively working with law of attraction, and I was attracting the things that my ego desires wanted, actually my wounded self wanted. And then when it came, it didn't work out and it wasn't what I thought it would be, you know? So that's the point when I gave up on it, actually, because I was like, the wounded part of me who was kind of manifesting things wanted was actually not what I really wanted. And that's when I realized that. Yeah.
So exactly, because it can include both, like positive experience, positive guidance, as it is mentioned, such as, for example, the right teacher teaching or assistance and help, even including material resources, money appearing as well at the right time. But again, it's not up to the impatient ego. However, and that's the key point with understanding of what a lot of New Age people don't get right. It also entails challenging situations, trials, disillusionment, struggle, resistance, and difficult initiations that may seem negative from the ego perspective or from the uninitiated eye, so to speak, but are important lessons and tests for the initiated soul to pass through in order eventually to cross the thresholds towards self-realization and to be reborn in the true self. But here's the key point. These quote-unquote negative experiences, as the ego personality may see it as, have nothing to do with attracting them because of your negative attitude, thoughts, or feelings.
Yes.
This is the key aspect. Right?
Yeah. And also, it kind of links in with some ideas in evolutionary astrology or just karma in general, is that sometimes we have situations that appear in our life which seem to be quote unquote bad or uncomfortable, which are a requirement for us to grow to the next stage. Or that's karmic, what they would call karmic requirement, evolutionary astrology. And there's also when karma has come to fruition from the past, including past lifetimes, which is just necessary for us to go to, which you didn't, quote unquote, manifest with your negative thoughts in the moment, which are a continuation of a stream of cause and effect going back lifetimes, basically. So it's very hard to know which one is which as well. And it's very hard to predict when it happens.
Exactly.
So,
and then continuing with that, then in this process, after many cycles and many lifetimes, and finally having exhausted all desire, right? That's a whole work, so to speak. And basically also realizing the futility of finding happiness through external means, then the initiated soul will realize the illusion actually of personal will as to give way to divine will, an alignment of divine will, which is also the deepest secret of reality creation, which has also been very convoluted and distorted in pop spiritual New Age circles, right? I will also say that there are some truth that your own internal shadow aspect, unconscious core beliefs can attract certain things, self-sabotage, there's something to it, but it's not so oversimplified and black and white as this oversimplified idea of like attracts like, as we see in pop spiritual circles.
Yeah, and then lastly, I would just say that it eliminates how powerful the subconscious or preconscious mind is, which is not what you're consciously thinking is only like a fraction of what's actually going on underneath the surface. So
exactly.
That's something else to consider.
Yeah. And before we go to the next point, I also want to point out that I'm actually currently working on a very long webinar course. It's going to be probably a 2-day course on how to create abundance in alignment with divine will and really fulfilling your creative potential and creating more prosperity in your life. It's a very important topic nowadays. I look deep into the forces of money, sex, power, and really how to create abundance in your life in alignment with your deeper soul purpose. And in that course, I will even go deeper in the so-called law of attraction. Also, you create a reality and other myths and really put them in a deeper, more tangible and practical context to empower you. So I've been working on that for many months now, have already over 150 slides so far. So if you're interested in joining that, sign up to my mailing list at veilofreality.com to the newsletter, and you'll be notified.
Okay, so let's go on to the second point. So the twin flame idea. I get asked about this so much. I see a lot of people fall down this rabbit hole, mainly people who just truly desire a relationship that is maybe based on growth or based on their spiritual values, which I think is where the kind of popularization of it in the culture is coming from, because a lot of people want those kinds of relationships. Okay, so I'm just going to literally read off of some stuff I've Googled about signs of a twin flame union, and we can talk about them. So, so you feel each other's energy even before meeting. You will fight against all odds to be with each other. You will love each other's quirkiness as much as the virtues. Your connection will be transcendental, expansive, divine. You will give in to the strong attraction towards each other. The relationship will have ups and downs, but will be fulfilling. Your union is predestined for the greater good of mankind. The relationship will develop fast and will get intense rapidly. No matter how many times you part ways, you'll meet again. The romance will feel like a divine bliss from heaven. And then also there's a fundamental aspect in this whole kind of twin flame literature, I guess you could say, that's out there that centers around the runner and chaser. So essentially the idea is that the union, well, number one, a lot of literature says, oh, often they're actually with another person, but your connection with them is so intense that you guys can't leave each other alone. And, they basically allude to the fact that a lot of the times the person is already involved with someone else. So already that's a red flag, because if you're getting involved with someone who's already in a marriage, that's not a good start to a relationship. But it's this runner and chaser thing, which I find especially interesting. Basically, what I'm reading just directly from a thing I found, that the twins can be so triggered by each other's negativity that running and chasing happens in the ascension process. So basically, they separate, meaning they actually break up or separate because the connection is so intense and they get so triggered that they run away. And so, from a psychological perspective, a lot of this speaks to anxious and avoidant attachment, actually.
Yes.
So the runner is the anxious one and the avoidant is the runner is the avoidant one and the chaser is the anxious one. So, it's interesting because there's some truths in this that, when you do have a deep soul connection with someone, it does feel like a bond right away. But I would also argue, especially referencing an amazing book called Inner Gold by, I believe, Robert Johnson, where he talks about positive projections in relationships, is that when you first meet someone, the positive endorphins are so high that it creates this feeling of romance. It creates a strong feeling of attraction. That's a good thing to happen in any relationship. Like, you don't want to do without that, actually. But eventually that does fade. And then when it fades and your projections ideally fade, they don't always. Often when that romance goes away, people are like, oh, how can we get that romance back? Oh, you're not who I thought you were at the beginning of the relationship. They usually fight to maintain the projections they had in the beginning or to maintain the feeling, not realizing that when the romantic projections fade is actually when true love can begin and when you can really get to know the person on a deeper level. So this idea that just having this very strong emotional overriding connection to someone in the beginning is something to just be aware of, meaning it can be filled with your own unfulfilled attachment wounds. It could be filled by all sorts of fantasies. It can be filled by all sorts of ideals that can make you overlook maybe ways in which you aren't compatible. So it's like a drug. This romance phase is like a drug, and you kind of have to wait. And it's like, imagine meeting someone on ecstasy, like literally taking the drug ecstasy, and starting a relationship with them, and then the drug wears off, and then you're like, "Oh, okay."
That happened to me.
Yeah, that's actually how it can feel with the romantic projections, Yeah. So I would also argue, you need to be really grounded when you enter into a relationship. You need to be aware of your own stuff will do you a big favor, but also be aware of how heightened the emotions can be in the beginning. And know what you're looking for, know what your values are, and also know how to spot someone and know how to be someone who has secure attachment, because that's the biggest piece. At least one of you needs to have secure attachment in order for the relationship to last and be a good relationship. So this is almost like kind of templating people for like highly dramatic, intense, emotional relationships, which, yes, can happen when you have a deep bond with someone and you're working through stuff. I'm not saying that it won't, but it can also happen in relationships which are not good for each other, which are not good for you. And I see a lot of people fantasizing about this idea, oh, one day my twin flame is going to come, or it's my twin flame, but he's just in another relationship with someone else, Yeah. And and that is not, that's not very healthy, I would say.
No. Couple of things. A lot of what you also said implies, first of all, to have deeper self-awareness, self-knowledge, psychological understanding without spiritual bypassing. This twin flame idea, ties into spiritual bypassing as well, where we normalize certain pathologies, even relationship, even abuse to an extent.
Yeah.
But the twin flame thing also, the whole idea when somebody identifies themselves as twin flame, the ego can easily hijack that. It likes to identify that. It likes to make itself feel better. Oh, I have this, higher relationship and all that, right? And also like it's a lot of these stages sounds like the romantic phase on steroids, which sounds also very similar like what Eve Lorgan called the dark side of Cupid or love bite relationship. That's actually orchestrated by other forces in order to feed off all the emotional luge. I've written about this. Eve Lorgan has a whole book about this. But I want to also just real quick on this point that it is also, again, nothing is black and white. It is based on some truth. Based on the divine union, again, from a spiritual perspective, esoteric perspective, go back here to esoteric Christianity. The esoteric tradition, Christian tradition, again, has nothing to do with the church, nothing to do with accepting Jesus as a savior and all of that. This is more the true esoteric, deeper inner work of the Christian tradition. And there's something called the fifth way of the polar couple, right? Of the quote-unquote union, divine union. But there's a prerequisite to be even able to recognize each other, to have this union on the higher level in service to the divine on a spiritual level. So some of these points are both partners have already gone through what is called a moral bankruptcy, full on disillusionment and death of the personality. They already have a connection to the soul essence, to the true self. Both have established the real I presence. And along the path of individual, they're individuating, ties into the Jungian shadow work as well. They don't depend on another person. Twin flame also implies almost like you're not fully whole until you have your other flame joining, right? You have also full control and mastery of the mechanical impulses, especially the emotional and sexual center, not mistaking sexual or purely physical attraction impulses or emotional infatuation for love, which a lot of this love by
it's all based on heightened emotions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're moving, as it's called in esoteric science, you moved away from carnal love based on the lower centers of sex, power, and all of that, and preference of personality and appearances, to courtly love, which is a deeper psychic spiritual love based on the higher centers and has nothing to do with looks, has nothing to do with sexual attraction, has nothing to do of any personality attributes of the ego. And lastly, they're also integrally polar, meaning that's hence the polar couple, meaning they're looking in the same direction and give each other precisely what each need, but not related to the desires of the personality, right? They look in the same direction, meaning in union to go on the way towards self-realization in service to the divine, but even have their own lessons and provide lessons to each other as well. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then, not to dive too deep into it, we go very deep into this topic in itself on our masterclass, what evolutionary relationships. We have that on the courses where we go deep into the
on Veil of
unit.
Reality. If you go to the menu, you'll see a drop down for courses, right?
Exactly. We go deep into what a true divine union is and the distortions of the twin flame. And I don't want to go too deep into that, but Sri Aurobindo from Integral Yoga also very well laid out 3 types of relationships. Number 1, the vital or physical relationship, which according to him, 99% of couples or marriages are this type of a union in the world, right?
Yeah. And I have to say too, what you mentioned earlier, this idea that someone just comes along and completes you is not a higher union concept. This is a concept which is advertised in every single Hollywood movie, in every single pop song. This is a consensus mainstream idea that you need someone else to complete you. And when you connect to the true self, you actually don't feel that anymore. You might want to be in a relationship and be like, hey, I think that would help me, but don't be this like, I just have to be with someone. Where's my true love? It's not like this desperation.
Yes, that's a key point also mentioned in the esoteric Christian, what I just mentioned before. Both people, before you can enter the union, you already have a strong connection to the divine true self, true essence. There's no desperation or desire or longing.
Yes.
For another, you have it already established. You have found the kingdom within yourself.
Yes, and that kingdom within replaces that like feeling in that idea that you're incomplete with another person.
Exactly. Then he talks a second bond between a couple is psychic love. This is have a call for a greater ideal in life than average man, higher goals beyond personal fulfillment, and not just personality development, sexual desires, and all of that. And then lastly, there's the true spiritual bond. And that's the highest possible union for a couple who, for both who feel the true call for a spiritual life, right? And has to find his complementary soul or his partner and to the sadhana, the spiritual practice together, basically.
Yeah.
And you can
learn more if you want to learn more about this. This is something and you want to learn more also about some essential relationship tools.
Yes.
Get the Evolutionary Relationships Masterclass is definitely worth it if that's interesting to you. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. So this is kind of related to the law of attraction, but raising your vibration is only thinking positive thoughts. So, your thoughts do matter. And I think that the main point of establishing I've been meditating every day since 2013, like a pretty long time. That's like 10 years. And being able to have agency over the thoughts that you pay attention to, and have agency means this is a thought I'm going to let go. This is a thought that maybe feels inspiring. Maybe I should focus. Maybe I should expand upon that, is one of the greatest gifts that having a regular meditative practice can offer you. Because for the most part, people's thoughts are chaotic. Like they just have random stuff come up here and there, intrusive thoughts, negative thoughts, thoughts in the past. It's like very scattered, right? So if you're that kind of person, establishing some meditation practice, maybe even doing some deep trauma work, because a lot of that can be coming from dysregulation as well, is useful. But, the idea of only thinking positive thoughts, again, is like just you're forcing yourself into a state of denial. Like say your mother died, for example, and you're like, oh, I'm only gonna, did that happen because you were thinking negative thoughts about her? Or is only thinking positive thoughts in that situation important? No, because addressing grief is actually a powerful way of transmuting, pain. So we want to really look at like our thought patterns in general and be aware of them. But forcing yourself to think positive thoughts is not only extremely difficult, but it's aggressive. It's a form of denial. And it's if you're only thinking that positive thoughts will change your frequency, and meanwhile you're like drinking every night and you don't have a spiritual practice, you don't do any work, and it's just you forcing yourself to think positive thoughts, then I guarantee you what's going to be happening, so as a subconscious level, there's going to be a lot of unintegrated emotional material waiting to erupt at any moment.
Yeah. Also called gaslighting yourself.
Yes, yeah.
In a sense. But you're right, it's not black and white. It's also important to have control of your mind and thoughts, not fall into like catastrophizing negativity, doom and gloom. So, what I call is something to be said about be healthily optimistic. See always what's the positive lesson out of it, the positive side of each thing, and not going down into pure negativity, doom and gloom, and self-pity. There's something to be said.
Yeah,
right?
I would say what's more useful is being able to notice your thoughts and notice how those specific thoughts make you feel, and realize that you have agency over the thoughts that you pay attention to on how you feel. And that's more useful, I think. But at the same time, if you do have a repeating thought that's negative, look into that. Like look into where that's coming from. Like this is a great moment to do some inner work around it, to do some self work, to explore the origin, why you constantly have, like, so say if you constantly have a negative thought that I'm not good enough or I'm unworthy, super common. Investigating, why do I believe that? Did someone tell me that? Was there circumstances in my life where I believed that? Is that true? So digging a little bit to uncover the origin, to understand the truth of where it's coming from, can be way better than just putting like, I am worthy on your wall and like just repeating that as a mantra. That can be definitely useful, but if your subconscious mind doesn't believe you're worthy, you can say that over and over and over again, and it's gonna show that you don't actually believe that in your body language, in your emotions. You're gonna feel that fact that that's not true to you on a deeper level.
Yeah. So that's about thinking, the mind, thoughts, positive thoughts, all of that. But what about raising your vibration? So we hear this a lot. Raise your vibration. The vibration of the planet is rising. We are vibrating into 5D and only good vibes, no bad vibes.
Yeah.
So we really need to understand the concept of what I also call frequency resonance vibration, which also ties already in this whole concept of manifestation, reality creation. But again, it's very much more detailed than the oversimplified ideas that are floating around there. So basically, in a nutshell, though, your frequency resonance vibration, your vibration, is based Yes, on your partly on your conscious thoughts, feelings, and impressions you're consciously aware of, but this is a tiny minority, and it's kind of like the best visual for that is having the big iceberg, little tip on the top, but there's a huge body below you're not aware of.
Yeah,
and that's the majority of your frequency resonant vibration. How your vibration is comprised of your shadow, meaning anything what you're unconsciously not aware of, negative, positive shadow, your subconscious, including feelings you suppress and not aware of because you force yourself to stay positive. So all of that suppression of what you may call negative and don't feel comfortable feeling is actually still part of your resonance vibration in an unconscious level. Also unconscious trauma, unconscious core beliefs that go back to ancestral beliefs, your parental image, past life, karma, universal forces acting through you, all of that. So this all comprises your frequency resonance vibration. So just consciously trying to think positive, ironically, creates more quote unquote shadow within you and gives you actually an illusion.
It makes your shadow stronger too, more
powerful. And you fall into what's also called into kind of mystica phenomena from the esoteric science. You overestimate your level of being, and we see this a lot. Right?
The problem with exiling anything to the shadow, denying anything, is that you cut it off from consciousness. And when you cut it off from consciousness, you actually make it more powerful. So if you're thinking just positive thoughts, but you have an extremely large negative thought lurking in the shadow and you're just denying it, oh, I don't have that thought, and you're just cutting it off, you're actually just making it more powerful. So addressing it with truth, with knowledge, with awareness is actually the best way to dispel the negative thought.
Exactly. So just changing beliefs, thoughts, and emotions, or trying to raise your vibration with a smiley face, or just even affirmations and all of that, or positive thinking on a conscious surface level, while it can be helpful to a degree, working through resistance are definitely not enough. So, but here's the key point, and I go deeper into this in my upcoming webinar course on how to create abundance in alignment with divine will, where I go deeper in this aspect of vibration, reality creation from a more esoteric, spiritual perspective. How you truly actually raise your vibration is not by trying to raise your vibration, but by removing and healing and integrating, transmuting and everything that's in the way of who you truly are.
That's what David Hawkins actually says as well.
Which is your essence, your true self.
Yeah, so David Hawkins says that as well, by the way, in the, David Hawkins, who wrote Power versus Force, who talks about the map of consciousness, that it's actually about removing what's in the way through feeling into what's actually there, through letting go of it. That you raise your level of consciousness.
Exactly.
And people misunderstand his work actually and apply like law of attraction, raising your vibration type like ideas to his work, not realizing he didn't actually say that.
Yes, his work is easily missed. People also judge his web map of consciousness without even having read his book.
Yes,
So that's because your true essence, that's the highest vibration you can have. Your true essence, your true soul, being connected to the divine, that also then is in alignment with your deeper, unique soul purpose, and you become a transducer for divine will. So and that requires deep inner psycho-spiritual work. And it's not quote unquote easy work because you have to go down into the shadow and put light into it.
Yeah. So speaking of shadow, let's move on to the next point. So shadow work. Okay. So here's a misconception. I've already done shadow work is one thing. Oh, I've done shadow work. I've been there. I'm done with it. I've integrated my shadow. That's a big one.
Let's go with this one first.
Yeah. Okay, let's go with that one first. Well, I think that it's an ongoing process that becomes nuanced and more subtle with time. What I've noticed is a few things that happen. A lot of people intellectually maybe have done shadow work, but it's almost like intellectually knowing your childhood wounds, like intellectually knowing your shadow issues. And your shadow can change and morph with time. Like, I would actually argue that most people don't really get the concept of shadow work and what it actually means. They have this very surface level understanding of it. And I don't think, shadow work is a one and done thing. Carl Jung would agree with me. It can take decades, multiple decades, even longer. It's a lifetime work, actually, I think. Until you're fully enlightened, I believe that it's an ongoing process. And it becomes more nuanced with time. And I think that the more sincere you are, the easier it is to catch when there's a moment where your shadow got activated or you saw your shadow in another person. But you really have to have this deep sincerity because it's not comfortable. It's not fun. It's confronting. And you have to understand that the deep value in it is that it eventually leads you to your soul and your true self and even your daimon, which is what Carl Jung outlined when he talked about how it evolves to this inner teacher, self kind of image. So unless you feel deeply connected to the true self, and you say you've done shadow work, I would argue that a lot of people who say they've done shadow work and are done with it, it's actually another part of their shadow.
Ironically, yes. I would say a lot of people say that also don't really, like you said, don't understand shadow work, maybe haven't really read any of Jungian psychology, really studied it, really knowing how to do it, what it is, what it implies. Because let's face it, it has the term shadow work has become very hyped over the past few years. A lot of people talk about it, say it. But even the ideas of triggering, projection, people have really like convoluted, very oversimplified ideas around it. And like you just mentioned, even to claim that you have done shadow work literally implies that you're enlightened, meaning you have nothing, everything, you're conscious of everything in your being. There's nothing unconscious.
Your personal conscious is entirely integrated because the shadow implies the personal unconscious, meaning all of your past material, which by the way, does actually include material from past lives as well.
And like you said, it's more nuanced. I'm not done with shadow work, but you made a good point. And I see this, a lot of people maybe get frustrated. I'm done with shadow work. I've done this so long. Because they have not applied it correctly. They have not done it correctly. Yes. And what you mentioned, the trap, I have seen this in myself. When I first got into Jungian psychology, studied Jung's work, have folders of it in the 90s, really read. And I started doing shadow work, but I was intellectualizing it.
Yes,
I became intellectual. Oh, this is a trigger because that relates to this and that. And my mind fooled itself just by knowing my childhood wounds or where it may originate from, that I've healed it, but the body is storing it. It was not fully integrated. It was partially intellectually, but not fully somatically through the body and really on all levels.
Yeah. The interesting thing about the shadow too is that the more we deny it in ourselves, the more likely it will arrive to us in the form of another person. Meaning we're going to see someone who actually embodies traits that we hold within ourselves. We'll project our shadow onto them. And to withdraw those projections, by the way, meaning to be like, oh, this nastiness that I'm seeing in this other person is actually a part of me, takes a lot of psychic strength because you have to sit in that realm of your projections. Withdrawing the projections means you take that energy back and you take it ideally back into your own self. And then ideally you gain self energy from doing that. But I have to say it doesn't help us that we live in a world where it's constant shadow projection either. Meaning that if we want to go along with the waves of the culture of people who are kind of very regular type people at our work in everyday life, we're going to have endless opportunities to co-project our shadows and feel that's justified in doing it. So the moment that you start to withdraw your projections, you're literally going against the tide of like 90% of people out there.
More than that.
Yeah. And so it's abnormal. A lot of people don't do it. In fact, you're going to get way more attention in this day and age to project your shadow because other people love projecting their shadow and feeling justified in it.
Can I say on this real quick?
Yeah.
Even on Twitter, it's a shadow projection luge fest. And, you can like get more followers, get more likes, and really viral content if you engage in the shadow projection luge fest. Even get some money from Musk for ad revenue and whatnot.
Exactly.
It's literally luge fest, left projecting on right projecting on left, and all of that.
Yeah.
And let's tie that into the idea. By the way, let me just say what you just mentioned as well. I want to add real quick. Shadow work is easier said than done because, like you mentioned, to retrieve the projections, the ego personality, the wound itself wants to justify the trigger, wants to project, want to like wallow in it.
Yes.
It wants to rationalize it.
Not realizing that your perceptions about other people are a revelation of your own psyche most of the time.
Exactly.
Or a confession for many. Okay, cool. So let's move on to, so being triggered is a bad thing. So I hear this, like this term got so popular. It's like, oh, you're triggered. People throw it around left and right. Even myself, sometimes I have to admit. And being triggered is not necessarily a bad thing. It's an everyday human event It's happening. There's probably millions of people on this planet at this very moment getting triggered right now. And so,
maybe you're getting triggered through this podcast already.
And so it's not a bad thing. We need to just normalize it. Like, what do we define as a trigger? An emotional explosion, an emotional reaction to something. And I would say there's a difference between a trigger than, so for example, this is an analogy I give a lot when we do embodied soul awakening, because people ask like, oh, what's the difference between a trigger and a projection? And like, just like,
you mean our course?
Our course, Embodied Soul Awakening. So say someone, you walk into a grocery store and someone just calls you a asshole or just a rude name, and it's out of nowhere, and you're like, what was that? And you feel hurt and confused and maybe a little bit angry in the moment. And then you do your grocery shopping, and by then you're like, oh, that was kind of weird, but you don't really feel the emotion anymore and you let it go. So that's not a trigger. That's just you having an emotional reaction to a weird and uncomfortable event. So if you can say ouch, here's the barometer if it's a trigger to explore or not. If you can say ouch, that hurt, or ow, like that made me a little bit angry, and then let it go, then no need to explore it. It's already gone. But if you stew on it, if you go home that night thinking about, oh, like, why did that person call me that? Oh, like maybe I was being rude, or maybe it's something about me, or, or you get angry at them and you stew on it for the rest of the night, then that points to the fact that there's what I would call emotional ammunition that you're carrying, that the trigger activated, meaning something from your past got triggered from that experience. And then, it is useful for you to explore it. But we need to not pathologize having emotional reactions. In fact, having emotional reactions to things, as long as they're measured and appropriate to the circumstance, is a sign that you're just connected to your emotional body. A lot of people are actually very checked out of their emotions these days. And so it's not a bad thing to get triggered. However, is the trigger is a trigger makes sense in relation to the event that happened? Meaning, if your mother died, of course you'd be really emotional, I would expect, unless, you didn't have a good relationship with her. But, like there's things that make sense for you to have an emotional reaction to, and there's things that don't make sense for you to have an emotional reaction. I.e., if you walk into your office one day and a woman who's in there who you talked to at lunch yesterday doesn't really say hi to you or greet you in the same way that she usually does, and you're like, oh, she hates me, what did I do wrong? Then that's something to explore, right?
Or the other way, you think, oh, what a bitch. You project onto her because she didn't say hi and she's just having not a good day.
Yes.
But in a nutshell, this is a whole deep topic in itself. Again, we'd go very deep in this whole shadow work and even way more trauma work and all of that in our 14-week group coaching program. Embodied Soul Awakening. The next round will start early January of the upcoming year.
We're going to take registration in October.
We have a little overview shadow work masterclass on our courses too, to get deeper into that. But I also want to address, I think people have a very misconception about shadow work, that they think the goal is not to be triggered.
Yes.
Right? And that being triggered is a bad thing. No. That's not how it works. The trigger is your teacher. Right? That's how you really... Trigger is only quote unquote bad thing if you do not know how to work with it. Right?
Yeah, and the problem is actually the ammunition behind the trigger. The emotional content from the past that explodes upon the person when you're triggered is usually the problem, not that you got upset.
Exactly. And then even you see this, I see this even on the political level, how the conservative, they completely misapply. They have some very superficial idea of shadow work and like, oh, the left is triggered. You see the memes going around, but making fun of that, but still don't even understand themselves how they also project their shadow onto the left and vice versa, and not really engaging into the work, of psychospiritual work, especially shadow work, in order to trace back to become curious. What does it remind me of? And all of that. But no, being triggered is not a bad thing. I still get triggered here and there. Absolutely. Sometimes big triggers, small triggers, we trigger each other. It's great material for the work to become more conscious, to get closer to your true soul being, to remove what's in the way of your essence. So a trigger is welcomed even in self-work, even when you work with a therapist or in group work, we welcome triggers because, okay, here we go now, something open up. That's a hint to integrate the shadow, to advance in the process of individuation.
Yes, exactly.
Right? Okay,
let's go to the last one. So humanity is ascending. So I hear this a lot. Oh, we're just ascending. We're all in this ascension process. I hear also things that when you get sick, it's a sign of ascension. Like they have all these
symptoms.
They have all these ascension symptoms. Like I'm just ascending. And so what do we think? What do you think of that?
Well, first of all, define, from the New Age, the idea of you ascending into 5D, and that nobody questions this whole 5D concept, which is very convoluted. People have different ideas about it. And a lot of it ties into spiritual bypassing, people overestimating their level of being, or even regular health issues, or what they're dealing with as quote unquote ascension symptoms. Because
I always wonder that when people say, "Oh, I'm getting sick, it's ascension symptoms," and I'm like, "Okay, so
my
what?"
DNA is recalibrating.
Yeah, but what's your diet? What's your environment? What's your state of health?
What's your emotional health? Trauma work?
Yeah, look at some of the basic things that can affect your health.
Exactly.
Especially trauma can create all sorts of autoimmune things, by the way.
So the whole ascension thing has been very convoluted, as well, ties into the process of awakening. And the idea a lot of people have, again, in the more pop spiritual New Age circles, is that this awakening process is a linear road upwards, right? Towards more love and bliss. Hence, you want to just focus on positivity and be in the flow and 5D and manifest and no negativity, and you live in the solipsistic bubble. Nothing affects you because you're ascending and humanity is ascending. We are ascending. I mean, I've heard all these predictions over the past 20 years that we already should have ascended into like love and light and union and mass enlightenment, especially around 2012. None of that happened. But it's not how it works, because the awakening process is not a linear road up. Yeah. It's really a spiral that expands on all levels, because the awakening process implies, actually shadow work implies, to become aware of all, right? To spiritualize everything. Like Sri Aurobindo said in his work, it's also based on the, quote, law of ascent and descent, meaning you can only ascend as high as you're able and willing to descend low into the shadow, into the mud, and clear it out and spiritualize it and bring it to an awareness and integrate it.
Into the unconscious, you mean?
That's what into the unconscious. Exactly. That's the quote unquote darkness.
Yeah.
Right. That's the same what Carl Jung said. No tree can reach to heaven that has not its roots in hell. Or Sri Aurobindo's famous quote, "No one can reach heaven who has not gone through hell." And that implies the widening on all levels. You have to do the shamanic descent into the underworld, as it's called, to spiritualize and then rise like the phoenix. And then you can truly ascend to higher levels because you have integrated certain parts. It's more grounded in that sense.
I think that just by observing the collective state of humanity and how very little people are self-aware, are engaged in any deep soul or spiritual work, that we've actually descended. And that could be you could argue that could be part of the ascension process. But I would argue that we are in a descension process right now, and we are in the process of exposing a lot of the shadows of the underworld in the collective right now. And it's not an ascension, because if it was an ascension process, can you really look at social media these days and tell us we're in an ascension process? Unless you're just following like New Age people who say that, So there's a descent into the underworld. There's a descent into the subconscious. There's a descent into your wounds, your traumas that is necessary. And it's a widening, not just a higher linear road up and up.
Exactly.
Okay. So
excellent.
This is the end of the first hour. So on the second hour, just to remind people, we're going to be talking about occult forces and entity attachments, these misconceptions about tarot cards and astrology, that you need a specific diet. That's going to be a very controversial one.
So
that's why we got to put on the second hour. In order to free yourself from the matrix, you just need to grow your own food, not use banks, etc. And then lastly, having an awakening experience now means that you're awake and everyone else is a sheep. So we're going to get into the second hour. So again, if you want to join our second hour and listen to the second hour of every podcast, please go to veilofreality.com/membership. And you can join and get access to every second hour there. And we'll see you on the second hour.